Normally I try to put out a video once a month. Sometimes life gets in the way, family stuff happens, what have you. So, some months I'll skip a video or something. And then if I'm feeling really motivated the next month, maybe I'll try to squeeze two out. But as for why there was no video in March, it was because I was busy playing Elden Ring. I really I really like Elden Ring, and it's very long. So my first introduction to the Souls series was I played a bit into DS1, and I think I either got to like the depths or Blighttown, and then I had to stop because I mean, I didn't like explicitly stop there. I kind of got there and then I kind of just stopped playing. It wasn't my intention to just stop there, but I don't know. I just for some reason stopped playing at that point. And then Bloodborne came out, and my friend's like, dude, I know Dark Souls wasn't like you weren't feeling it, but like try this. And I was like, I don't know. He's like, please, just try it. I think you'll like it. Like this is probably your last hope if you're ever gonna get into this. And I was like, okay. So I played it and I fell in love. And then I went back, played. Well, actually no. I think then I played DS3. Then I went back to 1 or something. I don't remember. But yeah, and then I played Sekiro. That one wasn't really. That was really different and in ways that I wasn't really a fan of. And I got to the final boss and decided it was too hard and I gave up. Because I think I only got to there's like 4 phases in that fight, which is part of why I got so frustrated. It was like, I can get through the first phase just fine, second phase maybe, but now it's just testing my patience. Anyway, Elden Ring got announced at some point, and I was like, okay, is this going to be more like a Bloodborne or like a Sekiro? What is this going to be? Or maybe this is going to be more like Dark Souls. I didn't know. And then after it got announced, we didn't hear anything for like several years. Like, it got to the point where there was so little news about anything related to Elden Ring that there was a subreddit started for Elden Ring, and they started making up their own content because they had nothing. It was so funny. I doubt I could go back and find any. Maybe I could. I don't know. I'm not going to go through the effort. I'm too lazy. But it was really funny. But it's out. I've played all the way through, and I've started a new file because I wanted to do a different build. Very rare where I'll play a game, start over immediately, and then say, I'm going to play this again right now. But I was just having so much fun, and I wanted to try out some other builds. So, at any rate, I decided my first run, I kind of like started not sure, and then I was feeling it out, which wasn't necessarily the best thing to do. Normally, a Souls game, you like want to start pretty simple, like health and endurance. Like that's kind of what you want to start because until you find like a weapon that you really like or some build that you want to do, it's good to just kind of go down the middle, you know? With Elden Ring, I was kind of feeling a different problem in that once I wanted to... It was kind of like a situation where early on, you don't get many runes, which are like your souls in this one. And I was having a hard time leveling up, and I wasn't going to the right places to get upgrade materials either. So I was having trouble finding just anything, miraculously. And so when it actually came time to wanting to get my build started, which I ended up doing a full intelligence build, I was struggling a lot. I mean, once I actually got my build on track, I think by the time I think I got my build on track after, what was it? It was after I beat Renala, that's what it was. That's when you can respec your build, which I'm really glad they have build respecking in this, because more so than any other Souls game, this respecking in Elden Ring is fantastic, because you get it relatively early. So it's like, if you've been struggling up to this point and your build kind of sucks, here you go. Here's a way to reallocate your stats, and you can do whatever you want. And the resources they give you that you have to spend to respec your build, actually, you get a few of them. Like, they don't like, they're not like keeping them from you. They give you plenty. So if you want to respec your build a few times, go for it. I mean, you still gotta like manage your resources and such, but like they're generous with it. But anyway, by that point, I decided I wanted to go full intelligence. So I like up to that point I'd kind of like gone mostly health and anyway. Yeah, is it endurance? Is it stat? Is vigor and endurance? I think it is. whatever. Health and stamina, and I kind of started going from there. And then I just respec my build. I was like, okay, we're gonna boost intelligence more, mind, all that stuff, drop strength and dexterity a little bit, blah blah blah. So that's the build I went with, which I know a lot of people are like, oh, intelligence builds are too easy. Okay, but I want to have fun, and intelligence looks fun, and there looks like there's more spells in this game than any previous Souls game ever. So I'm gonna take full advantage of that. At first I wasn't gonna go caster build, but then I was like, there's just too many spells. I want to try them, please. Yes, I'm gonna do that. Anyway, going back a little bit. Early on, I wasn't sure where to go. They just dump you in this big world to explore. They give you Limgrave as your starting exploration area, and it's plenty big, and there's just a lot. And 90% of the stuff in Limgrave is, at your early levels, you're fine. You can do it. Don't worry about it. I mean, there's a couple sections where it's like, okay, maybe level up a little bit more. But, overall, Limgrave isn't too difficult. But early on, I saw the Sites of Grace. And they had the Guidance of Grace, which points you kind of in a direction. And if I'm going to be honest, I kind of didn't like how that was implemented. I don't know. Because initially, it points you straight to the first major boss of the game, and that's Margit. And if you fought him, you'll know he is really tough. For a first boss, he is astronomically harder than what you would normally expect. He has the difficulty of, I would say, a standard mid-game boss in a Souls game. He's got strong moves, he's big, he's kind of fast sometimes, he has 2 phases. You normally wouldn't get that right away, but bam. And he's kind of it kind of turns him into this wall of, hey, maybe you shouldn't be here yet, maybe go back a little bit and try something else, then come back. After you've leveled up a little bit more, whatever. So initially I went straight for him, and then I decided, okay, yeah, we're going to go explore a little bit. So I went exploring, I found some stuff, got some spells, which really helped me out. I got some Spirit Ashes. Spirit Ashes, they're kind of like summons. They use your FP to summon a spirit or whatever, and it fights alongside you. They're usually spirits of enemies that you can find in the game. And honestly, I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, you're not actually playing if you're using spirits. No, go for it. The bosses in this, I noticed, were pretty tough, all things considered. And I think they were probably more balanced around the Spirit Ashes being a thing that was available. Because, some of the bosses just have ridiculous movesets, and some of them do not let up. It's crazy. So I say, and then there's some bosses where you're not allowed to use spirit summons. So if it lets you, by all means, go for it. I think they kind of balance it out for that. Anyway, early on, there's so much to explore, and you're basically given a section of the map, and that's your map. You kind of have to uncover stuff and whatnot, and you can go find maps to make what you're doing visible. Because initially, your map's not the greatest, but then once you find the map for that area, then it oh, here's all the terrain. So, that's very helpful. And then you can be like, what is this structure? And then you go there and it's oh, it's a thing. I'm going to do this thing, whatever. And I just got to say, the exploration in this is amazing. Let's take a second to talk about Breath of the Wild, because everybody has to compare Dark Souls or Breath of the Wild to everything. And everything used to be, no, I think it was Breath of the Wild was called the Dark Souls of Zelda games, and now Elden Ring is the Breath of the Wild of Dark Souls games. I don't know, whatever, it's stupid. This is things that journalists are saying. But, Breath of the Wild, there was plenty to explore. You stand anywhere in the world, and you'll probably find something where you go, I'm going to go there and check that out. With Elden Ring, not only do you get that, but 90% of the stuff that you can find, even if it's not really helpful for your build, once you get it, you're like, oh, that's cool. Pretty much anywhere you go, pretty much any cave you do or whatever, will give you some sort of armor or some sort of weapon or a spell. Like, go anywhere, do anything, and you'll find something of use. And that's fantastic. I like there being that much useful to get. You can go anywhere and find something worthwhile. And I had so much fun exploring. There were tons of secret caves to go in, tons of like random enemies that give you cool stuff. There's the like weird giant pulled caravans with random weapons on them. Most of those are like strength weapons though, which I thought was a little odd. And I did find that a lot of the early game weapons that you can find kind of weird, because a lot of those require like 30 strength or something, and it's like, that's a little high for this early. Why are you giving me those right now? Can you give me something with like more realistic stats, please? Which, I mean, that's kind of how it is in the Souls games, where it's like, oh, here's a weapon. Oh, I better level up so that I can use it. But the level ups initially, I would say, are a bit slower. Especially when I was trying to like figure out how the game worked. By now I've started my second file and I'm breezing through it because I have the controls down. But when I started, I was like, I wasn't used to having a jump button, which, by the way, I was so used to pressing X for dialogue that I kept jumping on everything. So I ended up switching the jump and the pick up, select, talk button. So I ended up switching X and triangle because I was like, I can't do this. But yeah, a lot of the early game weapons are a little too high stat for the early game, but I guess that gets you excited for more later. I don't know, but there's plenty of good weapons that you can get early game that are usable early game, so that's kind of nice. Like the Uchi Katana, which you can get as a starting weapon for a starting class, which I think is a samurai starting class. Some of the starting classes have like really overpowered like starting stuff. And I would say that's the samurai is one of them. But even if you don't start with the Uchi, like you can get it really quickly. And as I was going through Limgrave, I was like, man, this map is big, but I get the feeling that I'm not seeing everything. It's open world, but this feels like a pretty small open world, all things considered. And I was right, because once I started finding more areas, the map kept getting bigger, and like the boundaries of where I could look kept getting bigger, and it got really big. Like, this game is huge. And by like the 40 or 50 hour mark, I was like, am I even halfway done yet? Like, there's so much that I still haven't done. I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. And I think, oh god, I don't even remember what level I was by the end of it. I was like level 139 or 140 or something. And that was like, I would say that was probably, it was definitely over 100 hours in that it took for me to finish the game. And that's because I wanted to explore and I wanted to do stuff. I mean, there's just so much. And again, like, there's stuff I'm finding now in my second playthrough I didn't find on my first playthrough, or I found like way later than I'm finding it now. There's just so much else going on. And there's, oh god, how many areas are there? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 at least. There's at least 7 areas in the game, and each one of them is massive. And even within those massive areas, you have tons of legacy dungeons, which are more like your standard Souls-like areas, where you have a linear path, or like maybe a branching path, but still mostly linear. And then you've got checkpoints, shortcuts, stuff like that. And it's like, this game is probably the biggest game I've ever touched. I do have The Witcher, which I still need to play, and I've been putting off because I borrowed it from a friend, and then I had to give it back to him, and then he wiped his PS4. So now I'm probably gonna have to start that over. But I don't know how big that was, but Elden Ring's probably bigger. It's so huge, and again, there's stuff to find in every single corner of the world. There's random NPCs that you can totally miss. There's random like merchants that sell stuff that if you didn't find it the first time, hey, this is really useful. There's random bosses that drop cool weapons and such. It's everywhere. And as I said, there's a lot of NPCs. There's a lot of quests to do. So much so that if you're trying to complete every quest, good luck. Good luck to you. There's like the Ever Jails too, which have a bunch of mini bosses that nearly always drop something really good. There's what else? There's like a ton of dragons just everywhere, and they all drop really good stuff. And then speaking of, I want to talk about all the different builds there are. Because, let's see, like Dark Souls 1, what could you build? You could build Strength, Dexterity, Sorceries, which was, I guess, magic. Then there was Faith with the miracles, and there's Pyromancy. And for the most part, that was like, those are your 5 builds. That's what you can do. You can kind of hybridize a little bit, but those are your 5 builds. Then in, let's say, Bloodborne, you had Strength and Skill, and then you would want to hybridize between Arcane and Blood Tinge. You wouldn't just go an Arcane or Blood Tinge building Bloodborne because they are not useful enough, which was a little disappointing. But, I get it because Bloodborne's more about the trick weapons than anything. So I guess I wanted to focus on that. And then DS3, you still had kind of the same 5 builds, I think. There were a few more options within that. Like there were more spells, there were more miracles. The weapons got weapon arts and such, but for the most part it was kind of the same. With Elden Ring, let's see. There's still like the strength and dexterity builds that you can do. You can still go magic or faith. They didn't completely take out pyromancy, but what they ended up doing was sorceries got super expanded, so there's a lot of sorceries. But even then, they kind of split into a couple different sorceries. So there's like standard sorceries, then there's like gravity sorceries, there's carrion sorceries. Like there's a lot of variety in the sorceries, which was really helpful. And there was even like fire sorceries, which I thought was cool. But I think where I'm really excited for is my faith build that I'm doing right now, because the faith builds, I think, are the most variable of any potential build you could do. Because, like, you've got your standard, like, lightning spells. They shoved pyromancy into faith, so you can go a pyromancy build. There's dragon builds that you can do, like, where you can just shoot dragon breath at people, and that could be your whole build. There's a new status effect called Madness, which right now I'm kind of leaning into a Madness focus build, because it's really strong. Like there are so many options with faith, and then even past faith and magic, there's a new stat called Arcane. I kind of don't like Arcane as a stat because it's like, okay, some sorceries scale with intelligence. Most sorceries scale with intelligence. Most incantations, which are like your new miracles, they scale with faith. Some of your spells and incantations scale with arcane. So it's just like an added stat, and I don't see the point of it, but I'm sure there's something to it. Maybe that I'm missing so far. But there's just so much variety. In my first playthrough, I found this spell, it was an incantation, I think, called Frozen Lightning. It's so cool. And then where they had the weapon arts in DS3, now, what do they call them now? I don't remember what they call them now. But you can now attach new weapon arts to different, well, they call weapons armaments now. But you can put, for not for every single weapon, but you can put a variety of different armament weapon arts on various different weapons. So, like, let's say you start with the samurai and you've got your uchi, and you're like, I like the uchi, but, the standard weapon art I'm not a huge fan of. Maybe I want to switch it around. Let's see what else my options are. Right now I've got one that shoots a wave of light and then turns it into a holy katana. There's some where it's like area of effect, you pull enemies in with gravity. There's one you get really early called Storm Stomp, where you just step on the ground and then it creates like mini tornado around you. And then there's a ton of weapon arts that you can just attach to most weapons. Again, there's some special weapons where their weapon art is specific to them and you cannot change it. Eventually, I found out how to get the Moonlight Greatsword, or as it's called in this one, the Dark Moon Greatsword, which is even cooler than it was before, because now not only does it scale with magic, but it also applies frost and can shoot frost waves. But anyway, that one's like, you can't change that one. But just about any standard weapon can have like 30 different weapon arts on it, and you can just like apply those at a bonfire. Or, God, I'm gonna keep calling them all the same thing that they are in Sorceries. Not a bonfire, a site of lost grace. So you can like take a normal weapon and turn it into like a bleed weapon, or I think you can take a normal weapon, turn it into a magic weapon, a lightning weapon, a holy weapon, or a frost weapon. Like, there are so many different weapon arts that you can just apply to anything, and it's really cool. And again, there's so much to explore. Like, you can just have tons of fun just going around and doing stuff. I actually switched up what weapons I was using a couple times. At one point I got the Moon Veil, which is like a magic Uchi, and that was cool. But the Moonlight Greatsword ended up being my main weapon for most of the game, and I think it's what I finished off with. But like, there's so many options. Even if you're going just strength or dexterity and you want to start over with another strength or dexterity build, you can find a new weapon and still make things exciting because you're doing something different. Like, this game is incredibly versatile. I said I went a sorcery build earlier, but the spells I ended up liking the most, there's Comet Azure, which is like the really overpowered, like Kamehameha, whatever. There was, I don't remember, it's Rickard's something, and it like shoots a skull that kind of like ghostly travels around and then explodes a bunch. Then there's Rain of Stars or something like that, and then it's just area of effect, just bunch of magic pellets just fall from the sky. But my absolute favorite spell, even though there's there's two more powerful versions of it, my favorite spell is absolutely Rocksling. Rocksling is, if you're going a sorcery build, Rocksling is the best spell that you can use. It does really good damage, shoots 3 rocks at people, and does really good poise damage. So it'll like knock them down really easily. If you hit them like, even like big enemies, if you hit them like 3 times with Rocksling, they go down. It's kind of insane how strong Rocksling is. Like, I cannot express how overpowered it is. I used that through the end of the game. In fact, some of the stronger sorceries I ended up not using as much because like they had such big charge times, and even when I started like putting points into dexterity, it didn't change my cast times like almost at all. And then at one point I got a talisman, which is like your replacement for rings. I got a talisman that was like reduces casting time, and it didn't do anything. Maybe that's a bug, I don't know. I mean, there were a couple bugs that I did encounter. For the most part, there's not a lot. I would say the biggest issue is there's a few frame rate problems, especially like early on. But I feel like since the latest patch, or maybe just because I've been playing so long, I don't notice the frame rate issues as much. Maybe they fixed it, I don't know. But like, that was the biggest problem, and honestly, I understand. I understand why there's frame rate issues. And it's usually only when they get a certain distance away from you. And in a typical Miyazaki fashion, there are like a million Berserk references, and there's several poison swamps. Because, everybody loves poison swamps. Except now it's not just poison swamps. If it was just poison swamps, it wouldn't be so bad. But remember Toxic from DS1? Yeah, that's back, and it's worse. In fact, if you try to roll through it, it sticks to you more and builds up your ailment bar faster. Oh, by the way, the ailment bars, those are much better. They look so much better, and I can like actually tell what's what. Like DS1, everything was the same color. It was all gross looking. and I couldn't tell what my status ailments were. And I was like, is that bleed? Is that poison? I don't know what's going on. Am I on fire? Like, what? I don't know. Whereas in this, they're all like very heavily color coded. Poison is like green, or like a yellow-green color. Bleed is like red. Scarlet Rot is like a, I don't know, is that like a pink color? I don't remember. But Frost is like blue or white. No, it's blue, I think. I don't know. But just everything's so good. And they've made some UI improvements too. I know there was that whole spat on Twitter about, oh, the UI, if only it was better. And then people are like, yeah, you're thinking of Ubisoft, and that's an annoying UI, so shut up. But no, the UI is so great now. I mean, it's mostly the same. There's a lot of similarity to how it's been, but I think one of the biggest improvements is the like quick menu, which, so normally you've got your items that you can use, and they have to be on the same part of it as your flask, which, you know, it's not the best to have that with there, because then you have to like cycle through them, and it's like, this is a lot of stuff to cycle through, and then I'm dead because I had to cycle through so much. But now with the like quick action menu, you can just press and hold your like pickup selection button, and then just press one of the directional pad buttons, and then just use a thing, and you can get 4 of those. And then there's like 2 other quick action ones where you have to be in the pause menu, but it's like right there. Either way, God, it's so fluid. Now, the lore is important in all the Souls games. I would say it's a little easier to follow this time around. Stuff is a bit more explicitly stated, probably because you know, there's so much to explore, and if you miss one tiny thing, that's gonna hurt you in regards to understanding. And I think, God, it's been like a month, and even now people are still discovering new stuff, which, I mean, still happens for like older games, but I feel like this one, like, it's gonna be years before people find absolutely everything. I mean, we're gonna get like most of the game figured out, and then like years later people are gonna be like, I just discovered this new thing. Oh my goodness, this changes everything. Like, oh God, just the other week I saw someone discover a illusory wall that you need to hit like 50 times, or it has a health bar, which is the weirdest thing. Like, I've never seen an illusory wall with a health bar. Usually it's just one hit and it's gone. But, you know, whatever. But yeah, people are going to still be discovering stuff about this game years later. But yeah, the lore's pretty explicitly stated for the most part. God, it's so cool. Like, some of the characters in this are just so good. Like, there's one of the major bosses in the game, who's a required boss, literally learns gravity magic so that he can ride his tiny horse because he is so big. It's so much to make me happy. Like, even down to the last detail. Now, granted, this game was difficult. It was very difficult. I struggled a lot. Even with spirit summons sometimes, there was a lot of difficulty. There's a lot of struggle. There are some enemies with very large attacks. One of the later bosses in the game, in fact, like the second to last boss, has like almost arena-wide attacks that either you have to dodge perfectly, or you have to get like half the arena away from him to avoid it. And despite his decently lengthy wind-up, like, that's not necessarily enough time to get away, even if you're running. Now, granted, if you play your cards right, you can be overpowered for a lot of bosses, which I did find myself doing that. Where I had trouble finding runes initially, on my second playthrough, I'm having a much easier time, but later on, runes are handed out like candy. And you know, that's kind of how it usually is. Later game enemies drop more souls or whatever. But like, this time it's like, whew, those are big numbers. Like, I got to a point at the end of my first playthrough where I would be leveling up with hundreds of thousands of runes. Like, it was breaching ridiculous territory, and there would be some enemies I'd beat, and they'd drop like not great runes, but they drop runes, like the consumable ones that you get a bunch from, and they would give you like 50,000 each, and it wasn't like a few of them. It was a lot of them. Anyway, I could probably, I could probably go on about this game for like another hour if I could, keep coming up with stuff to talk about. But I think I've made my point. It's really good. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of options for all the stuff that you want to do. There's lots of side quests if you want to do side quests. The main story is great, but exploring is definitely where it's at. There's like 6 different endings. Like, this is like easily my game of the year, and that's after Legends Arceus came out. That's after. I mean, I guess I haven't finished Kirby and the Forgotten Lands yet because I'm playing with my wife, but that came out this year. Bayonetta 3 is coming out this year. There's a new generation of Pokemon that's coming out this year that I don't even know if I'm going to get yet because I need to see more, because last time I was disappointed, but we'll see. Breath of the Wild 2 was gonna come out, and then they delayed it, but you know what, that's fine. There's so many games this year. This was the worst game that could have happened to my backlog. It is now one of my favorite games, but it's the worst thing that could have happened to my backlog because, again, I spent an entire month playing it, and I skipped my video for that month, and now I'm playing it again immediately. So I gotta get my next video done. But at any rate, this game's fantastic. It's very long. You will most likely be playing for upwards of 100 hours. It's like 2 Souls games in one, if not 3. If you like the Souls games, play it. It's literally Dark Souls 4 and 5, possibly 6. And it's phenomenal. Easily Game of the Year. If it doesn't win Game of the Year, I'm going to be shocked. Like, that's after Sekiro won Game of the Year a few years ago. Elden Ring deserves Game of the Year. Easily the best game of the year. And that's saying a lot, because there's been a lot of good games, and it's only like the end of March for me right now. Like, there's so much going on. Alright, I know this video is already long enough, but I finished my second playthrough of Elden Ring, and I wanted to kind of give my thoughts on that. So my second run through, I went Faith, and I wanted to get the Flame of Frenzy ending. Unlike the Incantation build, I had a lot more fun with Faith, if I'm going to be honest. And, I've been thinking about maybe my third run through, whenever that is. I'm going to not do it quite yet, just because, I've already played through twice in a row, which is not something I do for, like, any games. So, but maybe in the future I'll do a melee build. But, my god, am I seeing the merit to having a caster build, or even just like a hybrid build. I mean, you probably could go through melee all the way, but I certainly wouldn't recommend it. And if you are gonna main a melee weapon, I would probably recommend bow and arrow for a secondary, because I mean, there's some areas where range really helps, I gotta say. And as far as incantations go, the range options compared to intelligence, sorceries, and stuff, way better. Way better, honestly. I mean, as good as Rock Sling is for an intelligence build, a lot of the other spells for sorceries, they just have, oddly short range. Even just, Glintstone Pebble, Comet, or whatever. I was quite surprised by how short range they are. I mean, they've got some range, but it's you want to stay back and shoot stuff, you're not going to be able to. They do not travel that far, which is a little disappointing if I'm going to be honest. PvP, it's okay, whatever, sure, but my goodness, the range is terrible on a lot of sorceries. But incantations, they have some pretty good range, I gotta be honest. Now, unlike sorceries, incantations, you don't get quite as many early on. With sorceries, you can go find Selin, I think her name is, really fast. But incantations, there's not a whole lot in Limgrave. There's a couple, I think. But you really don't start getting incantations until... I think you get, your first couple, pretty good ones once you get to the Weeping Peninsula. And that's when you can get oh, what's that spell called? I used it a lot. It was whatever the eye laser was, the madness eye laser. Actually, the madness incantations I found were very useful. I think you get poison mist in the Weeping Peninsula as well. I don't remember what else is there, but it also has the winged scythe, which is a fantastic weapon, might I just say. And then once I got to that point, things started to take off, which I tried to go there as soon as I could so that things could take off. Because up to that point, I mean, you really don't get a lot of incantations, and that's a little disappointing, honestly. Like, I think up to that point, you can get, like, fireball and, like, whatever the shoot a little bit out of your hands explosion is. And honestly, that's not a whole lot. It doesn't do much. I did find that a lot of the incantations that you can get, even, like, semi-early, are way better and way more useful than a lot of the sorceries. Because of that range and because several, not all, but several incantations have like status effects that you can stack onto some enemies. Once you start like killing dragons, you can get to the Church of Dragon Communion, and you can get some really strong spells, especially if you can get to the Dragon Communion Church in Caelid, which, as sucky of an area that is, it has some great stuff in it. And the Dragon Communion Church in Caelid lets you get Dragon Breath spells. They have a little bit of an arcane requirement, but Rotten Breath, oh, like that carried me through so much of the game. Like, as much as I like some of the madness spells, like actually, you know what, the eye laser? That's not in the Weeping Peninsula. I think that's the second madness area village that you can get to in Liurnia. No, the one in Weeping Peninsula lets you have, I think it's called Flame of Frenzy, and just shoots a bunch of like random shots out. Anyway, yeah, Rotten Breath, so good against so many bosses. Not only does it itself have pretty decent damage, but you can stack Scarlet Rot, and that alone, if you've ever had trouble with Radon, go Rotten Breath. Oh my goodness, that will take out, without you having to do anything else, that will take out like 3/4 of his health bar. Slowly, I might add, but it will. So absolutely, I'd recommend that. As I said, I got the Winged Scythe, and that was one of my earlier weapons. It's quite good, but I actually got rid of it the moment I found out about the Halo Scythe. Because the Halo Scythe has probably one of, if not the best, like, Ashes of War of any scythe. And probably a lot of, like, weapons, just in general. It's good damage, good range. I mean, it's not quite as, it doesn't go quite as far as the eye laser, but it's still got decent range, really good damage. Getting that Ash of War off, you can do it pretty fast, and as long as the enemies are semi like smaller or like mid-size instead of like huge, the staggers enough where you could just like chunk enemy health bars, and it's got such a low FP cost. Oh, it's so good. Oh, it's so good. So I used the Halo Scythe for most of the game. A lot of the fire spells I didn't really use until I, got through the Fire Giant. Because that's when you... Well, actually, I don't think the Fire... Well, no, I don't think the Fire Giant gives you that. There's a prayer book in the... on the mountaintop of the Giants, though. And that gives you some really good fire spells. Up to that point, not a whole lot of great ones, honestly. I used Black Fireball a little bit for a while, but it wasn't, like, super useful. I would say Flame of Frenzy and... Is it Frenzied Shot? It's something like that. It's whatever that eye laser is. That was also... I use that a lot. It's like, hey, is there an enemy like way over there that if I get too close, they're just gonna clobber me? Eye laser, bam, and it's just you just snipe enemies across the map. It is so good. I honestly did. I wouldn't say it's like sequence breaking, maybe a little bit, but I tried to like. There was a seal that I want, an incantation seal. Early on, there wasn't a whole lot that I really wanted to use. I mean, there's a few options early, but, not a whole lot that I was really wanting. What I really wanted was the Frenzied Flame Seal. Because again, I was going the bad ending. I was trying to focus on madness as much as I could. Because, despite that enemies that aren't like human spirit whatevers aren't affected by madness, the madness spells still do a lot of damage. Like, a lot of damage. And the Flame of Frenzy spell, I think that's what it's called, that does a fair amount of stagger if you can hit someone with all of the shots. Again, it's like spread out and randomized, but if you can get close enough and hit them with like all those shots, a lot of early enemies you will just stagger or kill them immediately. It's so good. Something I kind of wish I could go for another time. Like I said, I want to maybe go a melee build at some point. And I'm not going to completely discount a strength build because it's kind of something I want to do. But at the same time, an arcane bleed build sounds really fun. Because once I got a couple like good bleed spells, ooh, those are fantastic. They are really, really good. Like once you can get to the Mogwin Palace and get the blood flies, that's another really good, like decently ranged spell. And it will just like stagger enemies, hit them multiple times, and then it will just bleed them to death. And it's so good. But yeah, with a lot of bleed spells and weapons, they have arcane requirements. And I think blood weapons scale off of arcane. So I guess arcane's useful for something. But no, I kind of stuck to faith for the whole thing. Yeah, Halo Scythe was my weapon. Got a couple madness spells. Didn't really use fire until Mountaintop of the Giants. Rotten Breath is the best. I mean, that alone helped me take out a lot of dragons. Helped me take out a lot of big bosses. There are some bosses that are immune or really hard to stack Scarlet Rot on. That was fine. I still made it work. As far as the spirit summons, the Black Knife Tish, I think, was what I ended up with before. But up to that point, I was kind of just experimenting, trying to figure stuff out. I think Oleg, once I could upgrade him, I stuck with him for most of the game. But this time around, Black Knife Tish you can't really have until way late because Black Knife Electo is a tough Everjail enemy. But once I could, I actually skipped ahead to Landell and got the Dung Eater puppet, which is a fantastic summon. Not as good as the Black Knife summon, but Dung Eater is still fantastic. He hits big. He's got ranged spells. I'm not sure if his sword does bleed or not. I don't know, but he's still fantastic. He has a lot of great abilities, and the Dung Eater kind of deserves it, if I'm going to be honest. I will say that the hardest time I had using incantations was actually the last boss, which is kind of odd because even Melania I had an easier time with using incantations, mostly because I actually had status effects that she could be affected by, and I could easily get them off, whereas I couldn't with sorceries. I did also fight Dragon Lord Placidus, which I didn't before in my last playthrough, but I did this time. I didn't even know where he was before, and it's before, it's I don't get anything out of beating him because he drops an incantation and a sword or whatever that I'm not going to use. So I saw no point, which is also why I didn't beat Melania with this Sorc build. But, this time around, Placidus is pretty cool, let me be honest. And Melania, once I could get Scarlet Aeonia, that's a really good spell, I gotta say. It's really weird. Incantations, you don't get a whole lot early, but the later you go, the better ones you get. With incantations, you get a lot of decent ones early. In fact, you'll get a lot of really good ones early that will last you for a long time. And then up until the mid-game, and then you kind of stop getting really good ones. And it's really odd. Whereas incantations, it's you have to get a little ways in to start getting any that are useful. And then the further you get, the bigger and more bombastic they get. all the way up until the end. Like, all the way up until the end. Which is interesting. But, you know, at any rate, I did overall like an incantation build more. If I were to go a secondary for anything, I'd probably go a incantation secondary because of just how useful it is. It just offers so much utility on top of, you know, anything that's damaging that it has. I mean, really, what more can I say? And with this, I've also finished the 2 fully unique endings in which there is no Elden Lord. So I have yet to become Elden Lord, I think, unless the other 2 endings count. I don't know. But yeah, those endings are interesting. There was a second cutscene after the Flame of Frenzy ending, which really cool. It's really cool. Yeah, at any rate, I enjoyed my second playthrough. Easily my game of the year. Nothing is going to top this, especially with... Actually, even if Breath of the Wild 2 had come out this year, I don't know if it would have topped Elden Ring. I honestly... I mean, Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be a big deal. I still don't think it would have topped Elden Ring. This game is close to a masterpiece. As close to a masterpiece as I think most games can get. I will, you know, love playing this many more times over. You know, not quite yet. I have other games to play. I've already wasted enough time on it. All right, I think this video is coming up on an hour in length now, so I'm just gonna stop. Who knows? Maybe when I edit it down, it'll be slightly shorter. I don't know. So yeah, thank you for listening to me rant for like 30 to 40 minutes. I hope you enjoyed. I had a lot to say. Thank you and have a great day.